So, again, as I mentioned last time, I appreciate feedback, questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat and we'll get them as we go. And if you have any questions at the end, we'll obviously have time to ask those at that time as well. For those of you that may or may not have been in the talk in May, just to summarize, because this is going to tag on to that, the distress tolerance skills. In summary, it was on self-care, right? We talked about mindfulness, awareness of just kind of being in the moment, and boundaries. We talked about boundaries, the ability to be able to say no when you want to say no and be okay with that, like in the work setting, if things are too much, the ability to be able to say, you know what, that's not actually going to work for me at this time, but right, and I can. So just kind of setting some of those healthy boundaries. We talked about communication, assertive communication, passive and aggressive, and those differences. And then we talked about our negative automatic thinking. Okay, and today's session is going to kind of be in that same vein of those thoughts and the mindfulness practice. And then there was the component of gratitude on how we can, if we add that component of gratitude to our daily life, how that can also be a stress reducer. And when we're in distress, kind of help us in the aftermath of that distress. So anyone here today recently experienced distress, and what are your thoughts about distress? When you saw that title and distress tolerance skills, what did it make you think of? What made you, I want to know more about that. Can you share? And you're welcome to, not only in the chat, but verbally share as well. I appreciate any, that feedback. Anybody? What made you come today? So when we're thinking about distress and we're thinking about tolerance of distress, right? It's a way that we can, in that crisis situation, there's the goal of distress tolerance is that we want to survive the crisis or situations without making them worse. Okay. So, and how do we do that? How do we survive those stressful crises situations that we come in? How do we do that? Well, the goal of distress tolerance is that we accept reality. Okay. Accept reality. And what that means is that when we accept reality, we're actually replacing the suffering that's involved with that crisis situation and replace suffering and being stuck with the actual ordinary pain, okay, and the possibility of moving through that. What does that mean, Lisa? What did you just say? What I said is that when we are in distress, we're suffering, okay? There may be some suffering involved. The idea of accepting reality is to replace that suffering and being stuck with, pain happens. There is going to be pain, and it's ordinary pain that happens in our daily lives, right? And so the possibility of moving forward is in that accepting reality as it is. And that's kind of when we talk about distress, that's kind of one of, the goal behind that. And it's also about becoming free of having those strong emotions that come with a crisis situation, becoming free of having to satisfy the demands of those emotions, right? Of our desires, of the urges, of those intents, emotions. Okay. So what we want to do when we're thinking about distress tolerance and building skills to manage that is getting into our wise mind and regulating our emotions and those intents, being free of those intents, acknowledging them, recognizing they're there, and then using our rational and our reasonable, logical side of our mind to help that emotional side in balance. I know I had sent in a handout. Did you all receive your handouts? Can you give me a yay, a hand wave that you have the handout on the wise mind? Thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Thanks, Lisa. Another Lisa. Yay. Okay. So the wise mind is just that. It's the goal when we think about it's the goal, right? Of being able to survive the crisis and not making it worse. So we have in a nutshell, we have a reasonable mind, we have an emotional mind. Our reasonable is where we draw from, like our math facts, the logical, factual side of our brain. When we're in a crisis situation and we're distressed and our stress system kicks in and we go to that emotional, we have some strong emotions, right? So we make decisions through that emotional mind. And what we want to do is be able to balance that. It's about balance. So we want to engage the reasonable mind and use both reasonable and emotional mind as the wise mind to make decisions in those moments. Okay. So when we talk about any questions on that explanation? I'm going to look here for just 1 second. Okay, so when we're talking about the wise mind and we're talking about the how can we calm our distress when we're feeling distressed? There's a term that we use in therapy as radical acceptance. Okay, and what that means, what is radical acceptance? It means, what do we know about what radical is? It means all, right? All the way, complete and total. And when we say radical acceptance in reference to a reality, okay, the reality of it is pain is going to happen, situation and events that were not planned, right? They're going to happen. The reality is it's going to happen. Pain is going to happen. What we want is in radical acceptance is that we are accepting in our minds, in our hearts, and in our bodies. Okay, so we accept this situation completely. Doesn't mean, one of the myths of radical acceptance is that we have, or acceptance even, is that we have to approve or that we have to, whatever that situation is, that if we accept it, that means we're okay with it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that we have accepted it as being part of that checking. Like what's the saying now, it is what it is. It's kind of it's just kind of a statement, but there's some truth in that. And it's kind of looking in the lines of this radical acceptance concept. And it's radical acceptance is when we stop fighting reality, okay? And we stop throwing those tantrums, if you will, when reality is not the way that we want it, and that we can let go of that bitterness. Like when, it's not fair, right? This happened and it's not fair. The reality is that there is a cause and effect to things, and they do happen. And if we can take and start beginning to say, you know what? Okay, that happened. We recognize the emotion that comes with that. If it's a painful emotion, then you know what? It happened. I'm feeling this. It's okay. But we can begin to problem solve, and we can begin to accept that, okay, in this moment, this is happening, but that we can live life even with pain in it, if that makes sense. Any questions? Any thoughts, comments? So when you talk about, when I talk about, we talk about the acceptance piece. Tell me about a time, if you would, some brave soul. Tell me about a time when you were struggling with accepting something, accepting some kind of situation. Do you care to? When we're talking about this, accepting things as they are, and kind of accepting reality. Why do we want to accept reality, right? Why is it that we want to accept it? Okay, Caitlin says, when my dog died in March of 2020, it was very hard for me to accept. Absolutely, absolutely. And that's one of those where that is a crisis, right? We don't want to make it worse. You know, how can we radically accept that as happening? And that's where you go to the reality, right? Caitlin, I appreciate you. And that was in 2020, you said. How how did you, if you would be so vulnerable and share, how did you reach the point um, of acceptance? And what kind of things did you do to help yourself through that process?
I have a really great support system. I'm very thankful for my family and my friends. They all gathered around me and were there for me. And I think that's what really got me through that hard time. Um, and, you know, we received her ashes, and it's like that's kind of when reality hit like, yes, she is gone. There's nothing I can do. You know, she was my best friend. I had her since I was 16 years old. So
Oh,
I
wow.
had her for a long time. She was my baby. Um, so that was very hard for me, and still is at times.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate that vulnerability and you sharing.
Mhm.
Absolutely, it is. It's hard. There will be things. What kind of things did they, you have that, you mentioned your support system, right? This is huge to being able to accept reality as it is and having a support system. And some of the things you shared, the ashes, right? That's kind of that
Mhm.
finality, and
Mhm.
that this does happen. And
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about the emotional pain, how it shifted for you from maybe suffering, right? Because suffering is, that's pain without acceptance.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
So suffering is when we have pain without that acceptance. So when you think about the radical acceptance concept, and in that, the loss of your pet, how did you honor your those strong intense emotions along with the balance of that logical?
Um, I didn't deny myself to cry. You know, I allowed myself to cry whenever. You know, I remember I took a couple days off because this was sudden. It's not like she was
Sure.
sick. It was just kind of an overnight thing.
Right.
And I remember even coming back to work, I was at my desk crying, and my coworkers, they know how important she was to me, so they just, you know, let me go, and they were there for me too, and I greatly appreciated them as well in that time, for
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely. And I think that you make an excellent point on how we allow our emotions. They allowed me to feel the feelings, right? That's part of where we accept, okay? Accept the emotions, accept that this has happened, and then that's how you move forward, right? That can feel the feelings. Don't try to stuff them. Don't try to deny them. Buck up. Just feel them for the moment, right? And that's that whole piece of that distress tolerance as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate your input. And those are tough. Those are tough things. And when we lose a pet, we lose a family member, there will always be reminders, right? And we'll feel the pain. We'll feel that, ooh, right? We'll feel the loss. But we can move through that as long as we accept reality. There's a cause and effect to things, and that's how we move forward. So when we are talking about this, the pain and the response to it, okay, there's 4 possible options that we can do. And when you think about the example that was just given by Caitlin, we can solve the problem and end the pain, right? That's an option. We can change how we feel about it as we go along, honor those feelings, and then they begin to change. And we can move into the accepting piece of it as that option. And then the last one, if we don't build those skills and recognize that pain is here in our reality, that we're going to need to adjust to different things, situations, events, feel the feelings that come with that, accept that we're struggling with that, we do have the option of staying right where we are. Okay, we have the option of staying miserable. And that's a thought that's like, what? Well, we do, that's an option. Not necessarily the healthiest of options, but it is an option. Okay. So as I'm looking here, I want to make sure, let me give just my notes. Thank you for being patient here. So when we look at why accept reality, okay, is so we don't stay miserable, right? In a nutshell, so we don't stay miserable, because if we don't accept that reality, that's what's going to happen. So we want to look at our goal. Our original goal is surviving that crisis and not making it worse. Okay. So when we rejecting reality does not change reality. Okay. So if we put up the hard boundary of this isn't fair, why is this happening? That's that rejecting reality for there's a reason, right? We can go back and we can investigate why this happened, but it doesn't change the fact that it did happen. And changing reality requires first accepting reality. Okay? So hear me. Changing reality requires first accepting reality. You just said things happen, but we can change reality by accepting it, which means it's our response to it. Okay, our response to it. Pain can't be avoided. I think it's the universe's way of letting us know that something is wrong. Okay, so if we can kind of think of it like this as to why we want to accept reality, it's the universe, nature, whatever that is, telling us that something's wrong. Rejecting the reality turns pain into suffering. I think I mentioned that a little bit ago. Okay, rejecting it, the reality turns it into suffering. And refusing to accept reality can keep you stuck in unhappiness, bitterness, anger, sadness, and shame, and those other, painful emotions. So refusing to accept reality can keep us stuck in that unhappiness, bitterness, anger, sadness. When we accept Acceptance can lead to sadness, okay? But the deep calmness that comes with the acceptance will follow. And they say that the path, I've heard this, the path out of hell is through misery. Okay, the path out of hell is through misery. By refusing to accept the misery, which is part of climbing out of hell, you fall back into hell. Okay, so just kind of a little side analogy there of the path out of hell is through misery. And by refusing to accept the misery that is part of climbing out, we fall back in. So we stay that whole stuck in suffering concept. Okay. So what can we do? This whole idea of radical acceptance is definitely a distress tolerance skill. It is a skill. We need to be able to stick with it, practice it. What we practice grows stronger. So if we practice the pain and the misery and the resistance, if you will, then we're going to continue that self-fulfilled prophecy. We're going to, the law of attraction, we're going to keep it coming. So if we can kind of move into that acceptance piece, will help us. Radical acceptance is not, like I said before, it is not approval. It's not compassion, love, or it's also not against change. Acceptance is not against change. Okay, and especially when you say radical acceptance, that means, oh, no change. No, it's about that awareness that this is reality. Things do happen. Okay. Any thoughts? I'm going to send a handout to Lee so she can get to you along with the Wise Mind handout. I have an additional information piece for you that there's so much to this, and even in our short time, I know that I may pick up on this, and you guys can let me know at the end of our talk here if it's something that you want to continue in our next health talk, which will be, what month is this? This is July, September. It'll be September 7th. I'm going to have another health talk at noon on that day. So I would welcome you to join. We can continue in this same, there's just so much information, and it's kind of tricky. We have to let it sink in, I guess is what I'm thinking. If we let it sink in, I hand you the handouts, get those to you, and then, you've heard us talk about it here, and then, follow up at our next meeting with any questions or comments, or even how you did, if it made a difference and you begin to practice the skill and try to utilize it in your the daily situations that you run into. So there's another distress tolerance, and distracting is one of those, right? How do we distract? Just what it is. When you're feeling stressed and distressed, and what is a good distracting thing for any of you? What do you like to do? Play golf, go swimming, exercise, right? Watch a movie, read a book, right? This is all when we think about physical fitness. I had heard the other day, this really left an impression on me, what we're doing today, and is mental fitness, right? Even learning these skills is all mental fitness. And if we can think of it like that and kind of look at, what, this is, exercise for our brains, right? Massage for our brains. Just learning new skills to help us manage our emotions and our everyday stressors is just mental fitness in a nutshell. So doing that helping yourself, distracting as a distress tolerance skill, right? Finding things, spending time with family, spending time alone. Those are all those pieces of distraction that can be of help in those when you're feeling distressed. There's a little, and mindfulness is also part of that, where you're noticing there's awareness, okay, of just being in this moment, coming out of that. Yes, Trish. I've missed our chats. I'm wanting to attend this session to check it out. Okay. Thank you, Trish. Okay. So mindfulness is also a part of it, right? It's the awareness of the moment, coming out of that, you know, finding the gratitude that brings us and grounds us in the moment, right? There's also, along with the distracting and the wise mind, okay, the wise mind concept is that it accepts, okay? Radical acceptance is the other skill. And then the self-soothing. And I think I touched on that a little bit in our first meeting, the five senses. What are our five senses? Sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Okay? Those five senses, utilizing those to help soothe our strong emotions and calm our internal stress system down is basically what we're doing, right? So if you're in a crisis situation, stressful situation, and you want to ground yourself, the goal is we don't make things worse, right? We want to calm down. We want to, and trying to touch, right? Look around the room. What do you touch? Ground yourself, right? Grab a blanket, you're at work and things are happening. Just kind of take and touch, look at your pictures, look at the colors, really notice, right? I like to have in my drawer a candle. Of course, it's not lit, but it has smell, right? So you ground yourself, breathe in, candle breathing, okay? Hold, and then you're going to blow the candle out. Just pretend. And then you exhale, okay? Exhale longer than you've inhaled. And you have the nice fragrant candle, whatever that is for you, and you're grounding. You're using your senses, right? And at the same time, inhaling, hold for a few seconds, and you're blowing the candle out, okay? But again, exhaling longer than you've inhaled, okay? And music is always, I think, a nice thing. I love Hawaiian music, and my daughter lived in Hawaii for 6 years in the service. Her and my son-in-law out there, and so I don't know if anybody, but the ukulele is like awesome. It's just relaxing. It's just fun. It kind of takes you there, right? So that distress skill is using those five senses to self-soothe and to bring you down.